To show you the object model, I'm going to utilize Access 2000 Help. I'm going to go into Help, and I'm going to select Microsoft Access Help. At this point, I'm just going to go into any topic in Help. And I just selected something. It doesn't matter what I've selected, because what I want to do is actually look at the table of contents in Help. So I'm going to click the Show button, and I'm going to expand the Help window so that I can see it. What I want to do is go over to the Contents tab. The Access Object Model is buried, or literally buried, within Help, and it's kind of hard to locate it unless you know where you're going. In fact, I'm going to maximize so we can take a better look. I need to locate Programming Information under the Contents. So I'm going to click the plus sign to view Programming Information. Once I've done that, notice that Programming Information is broken down into various topics. What I'm going to do is go into the Microsoft Access Visual Basic Reference. I click the plus sign, and underneath there you'll see we have Microsoft Access Objects. If I click Microsoft Access Objects, over on the right-hand side, we can see the Access 2000 object model. I'm going to collapse this left-hand side somewhat so we can take a better look. At the top of the hierarchy, we have the Access Application Object. Underneath the Access Application Object, we have the Forms collection. And the Forms collection is made up of individual forms. It's important to understand that the Forms collection only references the collection of forms that are open within that particular application. This has nothing to do with what forms are stored within the Access database container. So when we're dealing with the forms collection, once again, it refers to all the forms that are open within the application at a moment in time. Each form that is open has controls within it, and each control has properties. So you can see that we can move through the hierarchy. Also, each form that is open has a module associated with it, and the form itself has properties that are associated with the form rather than with the controls on the form. Just as we have a forms collection underneath the application object, we also have a reports collection. The reports collection refers to all the reports that are running or open within the application. And within the reports collection, we have individual report objects. Each report object contains controls, and each control has properties associated with it. Just as a form object has a module, a report object has a module as well. And just as a form has properties that are directly associated with it, a report has properties that are directly associated with it. If we scroll down a little bit further, we'll see that we also have modules, we have references, and we have data access pages. Also in the hierarchy, we have a screen object that refers to the screen, a do command object that refers to the object that allows us to perform macro commands, the VBE object which refers to the Visual Basic Development Environment, and other objects as well. And as I said, if we scroll down, this is pretty comprehensive. Going over to the right, you can see that underneath the application object, we have a current project object. This current project object is actually very, very useful. Unlike the forms collection, the current project object contains an all forms collection, which is a collection of all the forms within the database, hence its name. So the all forms collection has nothing to do with what forms are open, but instead what forms are stored in the database. Notice that we have all forms, all reports, all data access pages, all macros, and all modules. We also have access object properties. So you can see that using the current project object, we could actually determine all the forms, reports, data access pages, macros, and modules which are stored within a particular database. We also have a current data object underneath the application object, and it worries about the tables, queries, views, stored procedures, and database diagrams that are associated with the current database. Some of these objects are available for an MDB, such as tables and queries, whereas others are associated with an ADP or Access Data Project, such as all views, stored procedures, and database diagrams. We also have a code project which deals with our code libraries. So once again, this object model is very comprehensive. One of the really cool things about viewing the object model is that you can very easily determine additional information about any object within the model. Let's take a look. If, for example, I click All Forms, notice that I'm taken into help about the All Forms collection. I'm told that the All Forms collection contains an access object for each form in the current project or code project object. I can then learn more about it, how I can loop through it. I can go to See Also to see other related topics, or look at an example of the use of the All Forms collection. Here we can see an example of how you can use the All Forms collection. We're declaring a variable as an access object and another variable as a generic object. We're pointing the generic object variable at the current project object of the application. Then we go through each access object in the forms collection of that database or current project. And if it's loaded, we're returning a true, and we're printing the object name. So this loops through all of the forms in the database and returns whether or not each of those forms is open. I'm going to click back to move back a step within Help, and I could also look at any properties that are associated with the All Forms collection. And we can see what properties, such as the count, are associated with, in this case, the All Forms collection. I'm going to go ahead and cancel. So we can learn about all the different objects within the Access 2000 object hierarchy simply by moving through Help. For right now, I'm going to close Help and return to Microsoft Access, right-click our friend Clip It, and indicate that I want to hide him. Each object in the object hierarchy has properties, methods, and events associated with it. So let's take a look. What exactly are objects, properties, methods, and events? We're going to talk about what is an object, what's a property, what's a method, and what's an event. Well, what exactly is an object? There are lots of different objects you can deal with as an Access 2000 developer. An example of an object is a form. And you saw that object within the Access 2000 object hierarchy that I showed you a moment ago. Another example is a report. A control is also an object, and there's various types of controls. Of course, list boxes, combo boxes, text boxes, labels, and so forth. Those are all different object types. Also, when we get into ADO, or ActiveX data objects, a record set is an object. And it doesn't end with these objects by any means. In fact, the world of objects is very wide open to us because using ActiveX automation, we can actually get to Excel's objects and Word's objects, PowerPoints and Outlooks, and many other object types, all from within the Access 2000 development environment. Each object has properties associated with it. A property is an attribute of an object. It's actually an adjective that describes that object. Examples would be that the text box called TXT first name has a value property. That value property is being set equal to Allison in this example. In the second example, we're using the forms collection, which remember is the collection of open forms, to access a form called FRM Exciting. We're setting the caption property of that form to I am exciting. So remember that an object, and here's examples of two different objects, our text box and our form. An object has properties which are associated with it, and those properties can be set equal to specific values. We can also retrieve the property values. So a property is an adjective that describes an object. On the other hand, a method is an action taken on an object. And if you want to be very pure about it, a method is an action that an object takes upon itself. But what it is, it's like a verb that applies to the object, such as the set focus method of a text box sets the focus to that particular text box. So this is a verb that applies to this object. Another example is the requery method of a form called FRM Exciting that's open within the forms collection. Requery is an action or verb that applies to this particular object. The neat thing about properties and methods is that they're associated with particular object types. For example, the set focus method does not apply to every type of object that you may deal with in Microsoft Access. So different objects have different properties and methods associated with them, although of course there's some overlap. So two different objects may share a property or method, but they may not. Whereas a property is an attribute of an object and a verb is an action that applies to an object, an event is something that an object responds to. An event generally occurs in response to an action, some sort of an action that the user performs. An example would be a user clicking within a text box, or a form loading or unloading, or a report opening or closing. So there's different events that are set up within Access objects, and then a user does something which causes that event to occur.